Greetings, nerds. This is Saint and Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. Happy podiversary. It's like
Happy podiversary. Is it really 8 years? For some reason, I thought we were like at 9.
we are, yeah, the start of our ninth year together. Yeah. Yeah, we just completed year 8 and start of year 9.
Wow. Yeah, we've covered so much. I feel like we're
Yeah,
already at like the 10-year point.
yes, it does. I know I was just thinking it's like we started out with the Arrowverse and we had a lot of folks and who joined on our adventure then, and many of them are still around and we appreciate you all, but also all the new folks who have come on the Scene and Nerd train with our coverage of everything for Paradise, of course, now with Star Trek stuff and Marvel, continue to with the Marvel and DC and comic book shows, but also I know we, dipped our toe into prestige television. And so, yeah, I mean, we have something for everyone. So, sort of like, so whatever season, if you don't feel us on the prestige stuff, you can always come back for the Marvel stuff.
Which we will be covering Wonder Man. We're going to do 1 or 2 episodes weekly. We know they're releasing it all at once, but we're going to stretch it.
Yeah, I think our plan was what, 4 and 4? Because I know we got Paradise coming up next week as well.
I don't
And I
think
know
it's 4 and 4, but
yeah.
anyways,
Yeah, 4 and up.
we've figured it out. We just don't have the schedule in front of us, and
Yeah.
we weren't
Yeah.
intending to talk about the schedule on this occasion, but we are here instead to talk about Fallout season 2, episode 6, The Other Player. The tagline from IMDb is "I remember good people." So I am going to continue to be such a broken record about this show. I'm sorry, but for me, this episode just continues to prove the point that this was arguably the most choppy I've seen it this season, but it didn't feel like a complete episode. I felt like we were really, there is a really strong episode in here, and that's featuring Barb. But then every time we jump back to the present day stuff, we're checking in on the Ghoul, we're checking in on Lucy, we're checking in on Maximus out of nowhere. We're checking in on Vault 30. That one really comes out of nowhere when you go back in the vault and you're just like, okay, so it just, in comparison specifically to last week, this really felt like a bunch of check-ins while trying to move along this past idea of who really is to blame for the nuclear bombing. Like, who was the catalyst? And at the end of the day, as a viewer, I will tell you,
Mm,
I I don't really care about who is behind it. I care more about understanding what happened to his wife and daughter. So I do see to an extent how through the writing, what they've done is they've kind of counter packaged those mysteries where they really want that to be an important, in the past, it to be really important to Cooper, like that his wife isn't involved, or like he he is the good person and he knows who the bad people are. But and then in the present, it is all about like the motivation of trying to reunite with his family even after 200 years. I mean, overall, like, I've only said this for majority of these episodes, but this is like the pinnacle of example of what I mean by, I feel like they have a lot of good stories going on, but for some reason they feel like they have to check in on each one of them every episode. And like, I missed Maximus last week. So when we got to Maximus in this episode, I was like, wait. We're just this is just to check in with Thaddeus and Maximus. so we can see how they end up reuniting with the ghoul? Really? That's there was so much going for the Brotherhood storyline, and I feel like we just put it on pause and have now checked in on it. But those are kind of my overall thoughts about this episode. Will, what about you?
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I even as I was writing just my notes for tonight, right before we were started here, I had I felt it was a solid episode, but I do also agree with you that there were bridge stories within, and I won't call. I mean, there. I don't. I won't go as far. I mean, you could, if you wanted to be like harsh, you could say fluff. It's like the vault stories. But I think your point is better that they were more check-in because it was like you said it perfectly about the with Maximus and that Thaddeus. I won't repeat that, but also I think with the stories in the vault,
Hmm?
we did for example, we learned that Woody is missing. I was like, yeah, and so yeah, I guess Woody's back at Lumen, but no, seriously though, he they were picking up on the line that because he had confronted Steph about her, the secret meeting that she was having with the Vault 31 overseer, and then we also did get to check in with speaking of the Vault 31, we get to check in with Reg and the inbreds and the whole support group and the snack budget and all the things there. And of course they had really good tension there because you're starting to see, even though they're having to ration the water in the vault because the filtration system or whatever is broken,
Mhm.
they were, they were, he was like, well, screw that. We're still going to have our party, even though the vault overseer is like, no, you're having all these salty snacks. You're going to drink up all the water. So, so that it's that, and also Chet and Steph's, like, shotgun wedding, all of those things, there's a lot of story there, but I felt like it gets short shrift because it truly is just a check-in and doesn't get fully developed.
And also, you paid way more attention than I did to what was going on in the vault because all my notes were about what happened in Vault 33 was uranium fever and the whole interaction about this support group. And
Yeah.
I like how they led with your snack budget has been revoked. And oh yeah, your your whole club is now suspended as well.
Yeah.
And it also it's I think why it stuck out to me was the whole intro was this uranium fever song and dance bit where
Mhm.
it truly does feel like they are losing their minds due to the reduction in resources. But again, it's we've over the years, we've covered a lot of shows that have had I mean, to go back to where it all began with the Arrowverse, those shows constantly had an A, B, and C, and one of our some of our biggest critiques of them was that the C storyline felt too much like out of left field. It didn't mingle and then you have separate characters. And in this show, to an extent, they're all interwoven because I mean, a lot of it is overall world building, but I don't know. I a part of me wants like the vault stuff to have be able to carry its own episode,
Yeah.
but a part of me also has no care about what's going on in the vaults. I mean, Lucy, who arguably is our central character, our main lead, she's not in the vault.
Yeah.
So and neither is her brother now. When her brother was in the vault, we like Norm was there. I could understand because of the whole father situation with Hank. But now
Yeah.
that even Norm is out of the vaults, it's like, okay, you really need to make some hard pitches about why we should care about those people. And I also think like they could have easily put the vault stuff aside and been like, we'll return to the vaults
Yeah.
in a later season. I don't know why it had to be in this season. Granted, we're not at the finish line yet, so
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
shall be revealed.
yeah, we do have 2 more episodes, but yeah, but I feel the same with the vault stuff because again, yeah, I mean, it is the A to B and C and D story because to your point, yeah, Norm is out of the vault. It is an extension of the vault storyline. I mean, everything flows from the vault stories, but the stories that are going on in the vault right now are, they are really removed from what we're seeing happen in Vegas, what we're seeing happening with Thaddeus and Maximus. So it does feel like it could be tabled for another season,
It is.
or wrap or have or really just if you're gonna do it, just
Mhm.
go ahead and just spend one of your 8 episodes with that
Right.
storyline.
Yeah, arguably, all of these storylines could have their own episode,
Mm,
and we could be at episode 5 or 6 right now and been like, "Okay, so now we're gonna get in part of the season where people start to meet up, and
yeah, yeah,
Thaddeus is now paired with the ghoul, and so but what I was gonna add in there is I did and again, this is why my first note is uranium fever, is because in this episode, we also check in with Hank as Lucy wakes up in her new surroundings in this very eerie, Pleasantville esque, where these people are now basically sweatshop workers
yeah, yeah.
and with their mind control device, but they're singing and they're happy. It was very Pleasantville. And so I a part of me is just mad at this episode because they should have gone full musical. We every storyline should have had the musical cue because you already had one with the sweatshop workers, and then you practically had one at a fever dream show tune segment in the vault. So I think maybe that's where my real frustration comes from is that they failed to commit to a full musical episode.
That would have been that would have been a very interesting episode of Full House. Yeah, yeah.
It would've.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there with you. Yeah, I would love to see Kyle MacLachlan on, singing the auto with the auto tune. I mean, that would be
Right, you give the ghoul a ballad as he tries to get himself out of the stick, and he winds up with a hole. I mean, you could have done a
yeah,
whole to call back to one of my favorite movies ever, Chicago. Mr. Cellophane, I'm Mr. Cellophane. You can yeah. Trust me, guys. I know that inside and out because I had the CD as a kid and yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I did also see it on Broadway, but I saw the movie first. So I think and it being set in Vegas predominantly, come on, y'all. We should have had a Barb solid episode. I also think that they could have committed to a full episode in the past between what was going on in the past last week and
Mhm,
this week with Barb. You could have had an episode, either this episode or last week's episode, been like half of it was Hank and half of it was Barb. So you see
yeah.
both perspectives. And none of this jumping back to the present. I think that's also what's causing a lot of this stretching is if we see Ghoul in the past as Cooper, maybe we don't check in on him in the present. I mean,
Mhm,
but it was kind of I did like to hear Ron Perlman's voice as the other mutant and just been like
yeah,
uranium
yep.
and all of this stuff. It's
That
just
was
there's a lot of missed opportunities, Will.
yeah, yeah. Well, I will say, with speaking since we're all talking about the ghoul, and then we will then go back to the past and stay in the past with Barb and Cooper. But with Ghoul and the super mutant Ron Perlman, I did like that story because one, it again, to your point about how it would have been great to have a little let the Google like break out in the song, but also it definitely it re it reinforced his whenever he it was very poignant to me in the sense when he was impaled there and was trying to scooch himself up that pole, and I think this first time in I think since in the 2 seasons that we've actually heard the ghoul refer to his former self as far as in name,
Mm.
Cooper Howard, and how he you know, because 'cause we've heard how he is, like his mission is to find his family, but that was really the time you know, that was, like, him, like, the all you know, pulling whatever of Cooper that's left in him, you know, to the forefront and as motivation to get himself off that pole. Especially before he went completely feral because that's why he has to take the drugs. So I really liked that moment and that scene. And then you know once the mutant did save him and you know and basically essentially try to recruit him to the we're they call us all abominations. So you know so again to your point about world building, it definitely it laid a foundation for I guess, you know, whatever either something that's gonna happen at the end of this season or in future seasons as far as all these various factions in the now United you know, in the wasteland in the United States coming against whatever, you know, whatever this cold fusion thing is, because clearly it is a through line that we have seen now between seasons 1 and 2, and it's very, very important because even the Brotherhood was like you know, fighting for this device.
Oh, well, I wouldn't say groundwork because I feel like we've been being introduced to factions since day one and how so them coming together I don't know because the ghoul it wasn't necessarily two factions coming together or that prep it was just acknowledgement that th- there's even these super mutants
Yeah.
and they're a faction and
Mhm.
and they're also and technically speaking the ghoul is a part of that
Yeah.
but he kind of has a foot in both worlds because as you put it like in this episode he also refers to himself by his namesake and his human identity and so he's still motivated because what I took away from it was I'll be honest I didn't really even hear him say his name but I heard him say like she's still alive like this idea that with Hank and everything that happened last week he's slowly getting remotivated that there's a possibility that he can be reunited with not only potentially his daughter but his wife as well
Yeah.
and so that allows him to be that's a very human emotion so
Yeah.
he retains humanity through that even though outwardly he and for the past 200 years he has and been turned into an abomination through the events of the nuclear bombing.
Yeah.
And to go back into the past, which they cut to, and I also like the whole motivation with his daughter being alive because that's the central debate that occurs between Barb and Cooper in this episode is the very much what is now and will be moving forward, the Last of Us debate.
Yeah.
Saving the people you love
Yep.
versus by killing others, is that justifiable?
Mhm.
And what does that make you if you're willing to kill others just to protect the people? Like you're putting one human life above the others. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
it was and And it's a very interesting debate. Like, we've seen there's a reason why shows go into that and really explore that, because there's never a right answer, and it's so gray. And thankfully, m- most of us can just sit back and be like, well, that's not my reality, so I'm just gonna live my reality. I don't wanna I'm not gonna dwell on that because that ain't happening right now. So I don't know. I'm not gonna make any choices. But yeah, what were some of your thoughts about the past with Barb?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I liked how you framed it as the Last of Us debate because it truly was that dynamic going on there. Because Coop, especially we we do get the whenever the episode starts, we get the flashbacks, and then we end up with with Cooper riding the mechanical bull. Very Doctor Strangelove inspired visuals there, especially when you do also cut into this scene where in this episode too, where they Wilzig, we get a flashback as far as learning that Wilzig was the one that gave Barb the directive to get all the people in the Titans of Industry in that room, and again another Doctor Strangelove reference too, because that was like straight up from that movie. Um, and so yeah, so I really like that, and then and it becomes the question: who is you know we to our as we were just talking about Cooper earlier, it's like who's the monster, because now he is he looks very monstrous and stuff, but Barb is also put into that place now back in the past where is she a monster for basically role being the person who like gets the human race destroyed, or or sets off the war. I won't say destroyed,
Well,
there's obviously people around, or is she just a pawn in a larger game?
I think what struck me was we thought we understood when this whole interaction was occurring, but it caught me off guard in a good way when she has that scene with Hank, right? Is it
Mm-hmm.
Hank?
Whenever
No,
whenever
no, no,
Cooper,
Sig,
yeah,
Wilzig,
was it?
Wilzig. When she has that scene, because after that scene, and I'll return to it in a minute, but after that scene, she then goes into the war room,
Mhm.
and we see her say what we heard her say in a flashback in the first season, and like,
Right.
okay, we'll drop the bomb. So by them doing that and that whole exchange, she's totally a pawn, because she's now been pushed and blackmailed. It's as if they found the weakness,
Mhm.
and then they twisted the knife and
Yeah.
made it into like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna have her say that." Because they probably also already knew that Cooper was listening.
Yeah.
So there it was. I don't At this point, I don't think anything that Cooper has learned is by accident.
No, no. Yeah, honestly,
Um
yeah.
Yeah, and in that elevator where we see Wilzig appear again, he says, "You're just a very replaceable part in this machine, but if you forget your place in this company, you will die, and so will your family. The leaders of the most powerful corporations will gather here, and you will tell them the only way to guarantee results is by dropping the bomb ourselves." So, and this alludes to what the title of the episode is, and that's The Other Player.
Yeah.
Now, going into this episode, I would, because they hinted at another player in last week's episode,
They did.
House did.
Yep.
And so I thought for sure we'd get answers. So again, I was disappointed when I'm like, oh, we're just continuing this illusion that there's another player. But yeah, so I thought it was a very smart thing, because I thought that that had already happened, but
Mhm.
we weren't there. So now, as a viewer, it's important to keep in your mind, when we do go back to the past, we're not being told these flashbacks in chronological order,
That's that. Yep. Yep.
which that never dawned on me before this episode.
Yeah. Same, and it did not for me either, and whenever we got that, I was like, "Huh, okay," and yeah, this is where the episode was very solid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, there are definitely some highlights of this episode,
yeah,
but the every time we'd go back into the present, I'd be like, "Really?"
yeah,
Or and it's not just the present because I thought Lucy and confronting her dad, that was pretty good. I've already talked about the almost musical-ish scenes
yeah,
that played out in the present, but it just I do think that it becomes choppy when you're doing too much.
mhm, mhm,
When you're almost forcing us to see characters in these episodes. I and but then again, I don't know what's ahead because
yeah,
we got 2 more episodes
yeah,
and now that Thaddeus, Maximus, and the Ghoul are together, and we know that Maximus has this idea to propose to Lucy with I'm just joking. With the what does he have again?
it's that same cold fusion, man, that's ano
Cold
yeah,
fusion, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's that same little that cold fusion capsule, and then, we also saw speaking of Hank, just real quickly go back to the past just for just a brief moment, we see Barb extract that same cold fusion capsule from Hank out of his neck as the whole thing is holding around the briefcase, and it was just the thing to extract it. And then also tying it to Wilzik in the first season, they also, that and to bring it back to Thaddeus and Maximus, the cold fusion that they have, if I recall, I think that was the no, Hank took the cold fusion from Wilzik's head, right? Because that was in Wilzik's head that Lucy had to
Well,
carry around
I
the
don't
first time.
remember. I do
Yeah, I'm
not
trying to
remember.
remember. I'm trying to remember if the one that Maximus has is that came out of Wilzik or the one that Hank has now is the one. But the bottom line is and listeners, if you recall, let drop in on the comment here on YouTube or if you're listening on audio, just make a comment on our socials. I can't remember which, but what I bring that all up is just like that again to my earlier point this evening about how the cold fusion is a very big MacGuffin for motive as far as this show and also to who the other player potentially is, which seems to be at this point seems part of the answer is the Enclave. I don't know if it's Moldaver or not because I mean she was around in the past, but she also somehow stuck around through the future. So maybe she's the one that's been the puppet master pulling all these strings all this time.
Yeah. Alright. Well, that brings us to A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, episode 2, The Hard Salt Beef. The IMDb summary says, Dunk appeals to various Dunk appeals to various lords in order to gain entrance into the tournament. Okay. So right here, I'm gonna stop it. They should have used the word tourney, okay?
Yeah,
And they should have put, like, little accent above it because I love the way they say tourney in this show.
yeah,
So, to gain entrance into the tournament, but Egg advises him to hold on to his pride. When the Targaryens arrive at Ashford, Dunk seizes the moment with Prince Baelor. Um, I love this episode. I really did. I was
oh,
engaged the whole time. I thought I really enjoyed it just because everything that I liked about this show in the pilot episode, it just became magnified. I felt like it wasn't about setting up. It was more about us really understanding who Dunk is.
mhm,
And they did it in a very clever way because they continued with him telling stories about his mentor, Sir Arland. But it wasn't the childish memories, and I say childish just because of how they spoke about about the past beatings and everything for a comedic effect. But this was told much more reminiscent of a loved one, and I really appreciated the storytelling in terms of opening it up with a monologue. I do wanna say, we have now seen someone shit and piss in
Yep.
the beginning of each of these episodes. No more. Let's not continue this. Can we stop it now? I will be deducting points if they continue,
I
'cause
think
I don't need to see it. I don't. I
yeah,
don't need
I
to
think
see it at all.
yeah, I think that's going to be the, yeah, you well, maybe that's just a framing element that they do where we just start with
Not
a day in the
necessary.
life.
Not
I know,
necessary.
a day in the life of Dunk, where we see his yeah, we see something like this happen, but,
Because we didn't
yeah,
even see it to Dunk. We saw it to Sir Arlen. Did not need
yeah,
to. Did not
yeah.
need to. And 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 I know without a doubt, I'm gonna say this now, because I know for sure they're not gonna do that with Egg. We don't need to see anything, okay? I just let's ixnay on the use of,
Bodily
relieving yourself. We
yeah,
don't need to. Um,
well,
but
yeah,
I do
little potty humor.
appreciate to go back. See, and I don't even find it humorous. I'm just like, unnecessary,
Yeah, okay, well,
unnecessary.
yeah, I'll stop now,
Um,
I'll stop now. Yeah.
like, my favorite, man, I'm jumping all over the place, because what I wanted to say before I get into my favorite line that actually did make me laugh out loud for the first time watching this show was what I wanted to say first was the opening monologue about Sir Arlen, and then going into the closing monologue about Sir Arlen. And it and what really stuck with me was the closing moment. At that point, it's not necessarily about Sir Arlen.
Yeah.
It is actually more about Dunk, because through the interactions he has with Baylor and with others in this episode, he has a realization that of his identity thus far has been wrapped up in Sir Arlen.
Mhm.
And he is the legacy. And so he now that Sir Arlen has passed, he can still preserve his identity by upholding that legacy, and also like besting it and bettering it and proving that Sir Arlen was a good knight and a good mentor, because he may have lost every tourney, but I won one, or I accomplished X. So I thought that was very profound and very indicative into who I thought we were seeing glimmers of in Dunk in the first episode. So, I don't know. I really, there was a simplicity, and there was more movement. I felt like there was, for whatever reason, a lot more, slowness in the first episode, but I felt like this episode, it just felt better paced, and it felt like the world was a lot bigger.
Mhm.
But yeah, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that this episode pacing was I felt better this time. I mean, you know, familiar with the book, so so there were I like where they one of the things I've really liked about this show is a lot of the narrative things that that happens in the book where with Dunk's, for example, people calling him stupid and question his intelligence, and even like with Sir Arlen, you know, referencing that as well. I like whenever they use scenes that where they will flesh out various scenes, like whenever he was with the puppet lady, too tall.
That's her name.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's her
yeah.
name.
And and they expanded something that whole sequence where he was not comfortable with women. I mean, I think and his lack of game that egg bails him out. But they took that narrative that was playing out in his head, and they flesh it out here in live action. That really makes it give us a better glimpse as far as who Dunk is as a person, and what goes through his head. So I really like how the show is doing that, and also just expanding things where it needs to, like even whenever he meets the Targaryens. I mean, those are things that are a little, they take those moments and adapt them to television in a more dynamic way that augments the source material, in my opinion. So really, overall, I think the second episode, like I agree with you. I think it definitely, even though it's a smaller story as far as like there's no grand battles as far as for the Iron Throne. It really is a good day in the life of Dunk and Egg, but it's really sh- shows it gives a perspective of this larger world, based on a commoner's even perspective, or even or
So
in this case, or a hedge knight's perspective, which and the challenges that he has just trying to gain legitimacy in this in knightdom, and this order, and all these all these lords who dream of battles and stuff, but right now under King Darren, the kingdom's pretty busy, is peaceful. So they're having to do tug of wars to like to be able to
right, right, right.
give bragging rights to over one another.
Yeah. So okay, so what I was gonna say is that the original show, Game of
Yeah.
Thrones,
Mhm.
and how they set up Westeros, what was so good about it, and this will be ironic considering what we just talked about as being the problem with Fallout, was that Game of Thrones had several different storylines going on. And so, yeah, to an extent, people were vying for the throne. But then you had someone like Arya Stark. She was never vying for the throne. She just wanted vengeance
Yeah,
for her
yeah.
family. Then you have Jon Snow, who reluctant and that whole situation. But you did see different angles and different people. I do agree that this show does focus on someone with no title, but very much like a Jon Snow, Dunk is someone who is vying for legitimacy,
Mhm.
vying for belonging in place. And that is something, a human emotion and a human desire that anyone watching can connect with. And so that's why he's a very lovable protagonist and very similar to Egg. I mean, Egg is just pocket sized.
Yeah.
So it's adorable. He's so cute. He also knows way more than he should. And they're doing a very good job about subtly putting that out there, and Dunk is not stupid enough to not pick up on that. Albeit, I think he also brushes it off and doesn't loom that much on it, but it's Dunk. He shouldn't loom on that. I think it would be kind of out of character for him to, because he does have a degree of being naive about people.
Yeah.
So I think that in this episode particular, I know we're only on the second episode, but they're really showing a good job of, because yeah, we're not talking about the Iron Throne, but that's why we got House of Dragon come out in a few
Yeah.
months to get into the political stuff. but there's
Yeah.
still politics going on. There is still, and I think that's why this episode drew me in more, because it did reaffirm this idea of, okay, what are the politics about a knight becoming legitimate? What
Mhm.
does he have to do? Who does he have to talk to? And then you hear about these battles. That's another fascinating thing about Westeros and this world that has been built, is that because of time and setting and what we know happens in the future and what we know has happened in the past, you hear all of these names and these battles and you're like, "Oh yeah. Yeah, I totally get that."
Yeah, yeah,
I probably did. Like, it is fascinating, and I felt this when I first watched Game of Thrones in itself. It's fascinating to me that simultaneously, there is this fantastical world with these dragons and these beasts and these magical entities. And yet, because of the history, because of the armor, because of the castles, it feels like Middle Ages. And
Mhm.
so you have to remember sometimes, and especially watching a show like this where we haven't seen a dragon and we won't be seeing a dragon as far as I know.
We won't.
You do feel like you're just watching a piece, a retelling of a tale that occurred in the Middle Ages. So it's great. I will tell you, my laugh out loud moment was him interacting with the Targaryens, and specifically at the end when it's brought up that, is it Maekar's 2 sons that are specifically missing?
Yeah.
So it's Maekar's sons, and Dunks just is like, "Well, I hope they're not dead." It's like, "Read the room, Dunk. Read the room." It was at that moment when, and he knew. I also
Yeah.
appreciated the fact that he knew it was at that moment he messed up and immediately got bailed out. But the whole back and forth between him and Makar and then him and Baelor,
Mhm.
it because of our time with the Targaryens in the past through House of Dragon, you're like, "Yeah, these 2 are totally descendants of
Yeah. Oh,
bloodline."
yeah. Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah.
it's just, oh my god, it's so good because when that tells you something about the characters in this world when we're talking 60 to 100 years removed and we're looking at the ancestry and we're like, "Oh yeah, those genes got passed down because of inbreed. They were inbred."
Yeah, well, yeah, well, the thing with Baylor, his actually his mother was actually Dornish. So, but he's the great grandson of Damon and Rhaenyra. So, yeah, so you definitely get just looking at the family tree, you definitely could see like, speaking of your like, the genes, oh yeah, they're definitely through. Through and
Yeah,
through
that's
Targaryen. Yeah.
that I like how you told me that he's Dornish because, okay, so he's got some Pedro Pascal in him. Alright, alright.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But is Maekar not part Dornish,
Uh,
or are they
he
both?
They both are, but somehow, but the Dornish gene passed with Baelor, and I guess that's, like with Jon Snow too. I mean that happened, but Maekar got the gene that definitely got that
I am
Targaryen silver hair.
I am so confused right now. So,
Well,
okay, there I just wanna understand.
yeah,
I just wanna understand. Are they both Dornish or are they not?
yes,
Okay, okay.
but but it's just like just some people the dominant or recessive gene. I don't want to get into the genetics.
Yeah, yeah, no, no,
Yeah,
that's not why I was
yeah,
questioning. I wasn't even
yeah,
going with the
yeah. No,
hair.
no,
I
no, no,
I
no
thought,
bastard, no bastards here. Yeah,
yeah, I thought the reference to Jon Snow was about them being a bastard, and I was like, "Okay, I'm
yeah.
so It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
but, alright, so I'm glad we got that straight. Neither one are bastards, both are Dornish. Makes sense to even to an extent how restrained they both were when they were interacting with Dunk.
yeah. Well, too, but also restrained because something as you mentioned earlier, there are no dragons now. So, so they truly are living off of street cred and just a Targaryen name at this point in history.
Well, that's
But it
what a
also
lot of
explains,
people
yeah,
are
but
living off of in this
yeah,
world. A
yeah,
lot of
but
good.
but I think it also it does also explain why Baelor and Maegor they're there because they do have to keep the good graces of the people, whereas before, you wouldn't see Viserys like or Daemon or anybody else like going to a commoners tournament like this. I mean, they would be beneath that would be beneath them because they could be
Yeah.
like fuck it, yeah. So I think that's another really cool thing I like about this world right now because showing that period between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones and just really just showing us where uh, further contextualizes everything that we know in the lore of this universe.
Can I make a rule for this show moving forward?
Yeah,
And this might be hard because you actually are reading the source material.
yeah.
But please, let's refrain from spoiling me about what is to come on House of Dragon,
Oh,
because
okay, sorry.
I only know so much, and I would like to remain ignorant about what
I don't think I spoiled anything
I
major.
don't
I mean,
I think so, but you're walking a line, and
okay,
I'm just putting this
fair
out
enough.
there for both you and
Okay.
myself, is let's remember, though, that technically what happens in the past has yet to happen.
Well, we know the dragons don't. They don't. They by the time of Game of Thrones, we know they're not there anymore. So
Yes, yes, but that is way in the future technically too,
yeah,
so but
true, true.
so we don't
Fair
know.
enough.
We
Fair
don't
enough.
know.
Yeah,
Um,
I won't reference I won't reference anything that happens, I promise.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that is the rule moving forward. Thou shall not reference the past.
Okay.
We will get
That's
there in a few months.
we'll get there in June or
Yeah,
July.
it'll be here before we know it in the
Yeah.
summer. Let's talk about the sigil.
Yes.
That was a big thing in this episode is Baylor points out that he cannot continue holding wearing the same sigil of Sir
Mhm.
Arlen. And so he has to get a new sigil. And upon discussion, Egg offers up an elm tree with a shooting star reference to the ending scene in last week's episode. Very, very good scene. I also like the scene. I mean, you brought up before Dunk has no women's skills. Well, duh. But what I found most amusing was I don't think Egg is the best wingman. I really don't. I think he understood how to neutralize the situations, but I don't think he
Yeah.
also was the biggest help in trying to push his mentor. But really the best scene between Dunk and Egg for me was when for the first time truly we see Egg try to get some advice from Dunk.
Oh, yeah.
And Dunk just says, "Well, people used to say I was stupid."
Stupid. Yep.
And for a moment, I thought they were gonna do the reaction like, "And you are."
Yeah.
But no, it was just merely Egg being like, "And?
Yep. Man.
Are you"
Continue, please.
because
Yep.
and what is so humorous about it is, again, we start this episode with a reflection of what Sir Arlen meant to Dunk.
Yeah.
And this and him learning how to be a knight. But now the question is, based off of that scene alone, does Dunk really understand what it is to mentor someone else?
Yeah.
Because he is now trying to get legitimacy as a knight himself. But because there's Egg, who's now has this idea and has put this out there, well, like, can I be a knight too? And I want this. Like, and somebody he has to look out after. Was he given the same capabilities that Sir Arlen had when he kind of took Dunk under his wing that he can now use to kind of shield Egg? So
Yeah.
I really like that moment for all of those reasons. And like I said at the beginning, this episode just really hit me,
Yeah.
and I thought it was a lot very, very solid. It fulfilled a lot of the potential that I thought the pilot had, but I was
Mhm.
very honest, probably because I watched it at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, just didn't hit me. But this episode definitely hit me.
Yeah, yeah, it hit yeah, for me, it just, further helped me, like yeah, I really, really enjoyed this show, and it also too, like, during the tournament, whenever yeah, yeah, when you were talking about Dunk being a mentor to Egg and while the tournament was going on and because they were all into it, and then I know Dunk was having some he was the moments there where he was they were doing some flashbacks and about being a mentor for Egg and thinking about, like, I was I think there was a scene where Dunk was asking, whenever he was a squire to Arlen, "One day am I gonna be a knight?" And Arlen really didn't, like, give him an answer. So, I'm s looking yeah, I do it will be I will see how things will go progress too. Because even, like, I think you're referencing the conversation about, Dunk and Egg and this, people calling him, stupid or whatever, and s Egg, talked about his size and being a small guy, and, Arl and Dunk was like, "He'll grow," it was just kinda like, "Maybe I will," but it was just it was just I just really enjoy their interactions and the innocence that Dunk has and the naivety because it's not so much that he's dumb, I don't think he's a dumb guy. He just lacks he just lacks people skills and reading social cues and stuff. So maybe he has low emotional intelligence as far as that, but as far as he's savvy. I don't want to say he's street smart because I mean, Ed clearly is just more street
Yeah.
smart too. But he has a
I
way.
think
He's a survivor.
he's just simple.
He's
He's a
simple. Yeah,
very
he's a simple
simple
dude.
person,
Yeah.
and I don't even know if he's a survivor from what I've seen so far in these 2 episodes. He he's because he's been given some good luck.
Yeah.
Everything he's been given, he fully you're right. Dumb is probably too strong a word, but I also don't he's not a mastermind. He's just
No,
a
no, yeah,
very simple
'cause
person because
yeah,
he's lived his world is very simple.
his world is
So,
simple. Yeah,
he doesn't have this big plan or this big
no,
scheme, and he doesn't view the world in that, and I think that's where
yeah,
that's why it will, as the show continues, become more fascinating to watch. This person who's been very simple, he sleeps under the stars,
mhm,
he shits on the side of a tree. He's
yeah. Had to sell his place.
navigating the politics that we all know exist in Westeros.
Yeah,
Like, the through this pursuit of legitimacy as a knight, he becomes it will is taking it head on and unknowingly stumbling around this bigger than life game that is being played between among all of these nobles. So I think that's where the interest in the story comes from because it's too it's a big world for a very simple individual.
Yeah, 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 and I guess when I say yeah, I mean, I guess maybe survivor wasn't the right term, it's just more he's making his way. I mean, just think when you're, like, he's trying to even get armor for the games, for the tourney. I mean, and having to do the barter, so, he's trying to he had to sell his the sweetest horse, and then it was a very sweet scene where they had whenever they were just he was like, I'll win the money back so I can purchase you back again." So, so he is simple, but he finds a way to be able to get what he needs, and then too and at the end of the day, it is a very noble quest to, like, try to gain that legitimacy that was so poignant that we saw with the bookends of his idealized notion of Arlen, and then the reflection that he had at the end of the episode.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will talk again next week. And on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on all the socials at Will M. Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me there too at SJ Belmont, SJBLMONT. Please follow our crew on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Scene and Nerd, on Blue Sky. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Threads at scene_ed_nerd, and visit our website, www.sceneandnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.